Fame has a price. Everyone who chases it knows that. The long hours, the lost privacy, the relationships that don't survive the spotlight, those are the costs people talk about. But there's another cost, the one nobody puts in the contract, the one that doesn't show up until it's too late. These 10 women were at the absolute top of everything they had built, cameras still pointing at them, audiences still watching, contracts still signed, and then, without warning, without explanation, without anyone in the industry doing anything to prevent it, they were gone. This is not a story about celebrity. This is a story about a machine that uses people up and then cannot explain where they went. 10 women, 90 years of Hollywood history, and questions the industry has never once stood up to answer. In 1937, Jean Harlow was 26 years old and in the middle of filming her next picture when her kidneys started shutting down. That detail matters. She didn't call in sick. She didn't slow down. She was Jean Harlow, the blonde bombshell, the woman who could share a frame with Clark Gable and make the audience forget Clark Gable existed. MGM had her scheduled back-to-back, so she kept showing up. The warning signs had been visible for weeks. The exhaustion that wouldn't lift, the swelling, the headaches that came every morning and stayed, the people around her saw it. Her mother, Mama Jean, a devout Christian Scientist, was around her constantly. And Christian Science teaches that illness is a spiritual failure, not a medical one. Prayer is the solution. Doctors are not. When Jean Harlow's body began to fail, her mother prayed. By the time William Powell, her boyfriend, who was not a Christian Scientist, understood what was happening and intervened, her kidneys had already failed. She was hospitalized with uremic poisoning. She died on June 7, 1937, 26 years old, still on contract. MGM completed her unfinished film Saratoga using body doubles and stand-ins. It was released 2 months after her death. It made money. The studio collected every cent. Medical historians have noted for decades that kidney disease at her stage was survivable with early intervention, even in 1937. She was the most famous woman in the world. The person responsible for her care chose prayer over a phone call, and the studio that owned her contract finished the movie without her and released it on schedule. But the next woman on this list didn't die from neglect. She died from violence, and what happened at the crash site was something nobody in the media should have published. By 1967, Jayne Mansfield was 34 years old and still working. Nightclubs, television, touring, performing. The blonde bombshell era that made her famous had given way to something newer and younger, but she adapted. She had 5 children. She had a pink mansion in Beverly Hills. She was not going quietly. On the night of June 28th, Mansfield was traveling through early morning fog toward New Orleans with her attorney, her boyfriend Sam Brody, and 3 of her children. The car drove its speed into the rear of a slow-moving truck. Mansfield, Brody, and the driver were killed instantly. Her 3 children survived in the back seat. One of them was a 3-year-old girl named Mariska Hargitay. In the chaos that followed, the wreckage, the emergency response, the press already arriving, the toddler was left at the scene before anyone realized she was still there. The tabloids published photographs. They published language that no family should be forced to read. The coverage was spectacle, not journalism. And then Hollywood moved on in days, as it always does. What the industry never amplified, Mariska Hargitay grew up and became one of the most successful actresses in American television history. Decades of Law and Order, SVU, a Golden Globe, an Emmy. She has spoken about carrying her mother's death every single day of her life. In 2025, she made a documentary about Jayne Mansfield because the industry that abandoned her mother in 1967 never told the full story. The daughter became everything the mother was reaching for. Hollywood forgot the mother in weeks. The daughter made it impossible to look away. The next name on this list was 22 years old. She was just beginning. And the man who killed her served less time than most people spend in college. Most people who have seen Poltergeist think of the little girl. They're here. What most people don't register is the older daughter, Dana, who appears in the opening, asking to stay at a friend's house. The actress who played Donna was Dominique Dunne. She was 22 years old. She was at the beginning of everything. She had also recently ended a relationship with a chef named John Thomas Sweeney. He had been physically violent during the relationship, on multiple documented occasions. She had tried to end it cleanly and completely. She had people around her who knew the situation. On the night of October 30th, 1982, Sweeney came to her West Hollywood home. He found her outside with a friend. Nothing more than that. He grabbed her. He strangled her in her own driveway. Her friend ran inside to call the police. Dominique Dunne never regained consciousness. She died 5 days later. Sweeney was charged with first-degree murder. His defense team introduced evidence about Dominique Dunne's personal life, her relationship history, her character, things entirely irrelevant to the fact that a man had strangled her in her own driveway. The jury convicted him of voluntary manslaughter. He served 3.5 years. He was released in 1986. He changed his name. He found work as a chef in California. The Dunne family ate at his restaurant once, accidentally, not knowing who their waiter was. The restaurant fired him when the story became public. 3.5 years. That is what the court decided her life was worth. A career barely started. A young woman who tried to get out and was murdered for it. The system that processed her killer felt more interested in defending him than in explaining what he had done. The next woman on this list didn't die at the hands of a stranger. She was destroyed by the man who claimed to have discovered her. Most people have never heard her name. Most people would not recognize her photograph, and that absence is itself the entire story. Dorothy Stratten was 20 years old in 1980. She had been discovered in Vancouver at 17 by a man named Paul Snyder, a small-time promoter who saw her, recognized what she was, and understood immediately that she was more valuable than anything else in his life. He brought her to Hugh Hefner. She became Playmate of the Year. Film offers started arriving. Peter Bogdanovich, a major Hollywood director, and cast her, and they all laughed and fell in love with her on set. Everyone who worked with her said the same thing. The camera loved her. The talent was real. And Dorothy Stratten, with enormous courage, given where she had come from, decided to leave Paul Snyder. She recognized what he was. She understood that the life he had built around her was a trap. She tried to get out. On August 14, 1980, Paul Snyder shot Dorothy Stratten. Then, he turned the gun on himself. She was 20 years old. They All Laughed was released 4 months after her death. Bogdanovich paid for the distribution himself, refusing to let a studio profit from it without acknowledgement of what had happened. Hollywood published her photographs for years. It did not protect her when the man controlling her became dangerous, and when she died, it moved on so fast that most people alive today cannot place her name. The system that packaged her image never asked what the man managing her access was capable of. It never had to. She was the one who paid. The next story happened in 2007. 2 people died. In the same house, 5 months apart, the same cause each time. Nobody was ever convicted. In the fall of 2006, Anna Nicole Smith gave birth to a daughter, Danny Lynn, in a hospital in the Bahamas. 3 days later, her 20-year-old son Daniel died in her hospital room from an accidental drug combination. She held his body. She collapsed. She was photographed doing both. 5 months later, on February 8, 2007, she was found unresponsive in a hotel room at the Hard Rock Hotel in Hollywood, Florida. She was 39 years old. The autopsy found 9 prescription medications in her system, written by multiple doctors, some under aliases, some prescribed to different names. The official cause of death was accidental overdose. Her companion and attorney, Howard K. Stern, was charged with furnishing controlled substances. He was acquitted. What followed was a media circus that only the most tabloid-saturated culture on Earth could produce, a paternity battle for Danny Lynn, an estate battle that ran for years, competing legal claims, DNA tests broadcast in real time. Almost none of the coverage asked the question that the facts made unavoidable. How does a woman who had just lost her son, who was visibly falling apart, who was surrounded by people with significant financial interests in her continued existence, end up alone in a hotel room with 9 medications in her system and no one held responsible? The industry that made her famous, through reality television, through relentless coverage of her grief and her chaos and her body as entertainment product, offered condolences and moved on before her daughter spoke her first word. The machine extracted everything it could. Then it looked away. The next woman on this list was illegally married at 15. The industry knew, and it said nothing for 20 years. There is one fact in the timeline of Aaliyah's life that the industry spent years refusing to properly address. In 1994, when she was 15 years old, she was illegally married to a 33-year-old R. Kelly. The marriage certificate listed her age as 18. She was 15. Someone falsified a legal document. Multiple people knew. The record label knew. No one was charged. The music continued. She went on to build one of the most genuinely exceptional careers in late 1990s R&B. By 2001, she had transitioned into film. Romeo Must Die, Queen of the Damned. She was 22 years old, and the trajectory was impossible to ignore. In August of 2001, she wrapped a music video shoot in the Bahamas and boarded a small charter aircraft back to the United States. Aviation records later established that the plane was significantly overloaded with luggage, with equipment, with people. Multiple witnesses reported hearing arguments about the safety of the departure. The plane took off anyway. It crashed approximately 200 meters from the runway. Aaliyah and 8 others died on impact. The investigation found the aircraft overloaded and the pilot carrying cocaine and alcohol in his system. Nobody was imprisoned for the crash. R. Kelly's career continued for another 20 years before a federal conviction finally arrived. He is currently serving a 30-year sentence. The 15-year-old he illegally married became one of the greatest artists of her generation, died in circumstances that should have been prevented, and spent years after her death having that part of her childhood quietly omitted from every tribute the industry published. The next woman on this list was 8.5 months pregnant. She was not targeted for what she had done. She was targeted for the address on her front door. In 1969, Sharon Tate was one of the most luminous figures in Hollywood. She had appeared in Valley of the Dolls, The Fearless Vampire Killers, and Rosemary's Baby, 3 films across 2 years that gave her enormous visibility and undeniable promise. She was 26 years old. She was 8.5 months pregnant. She was married to Roman Polanski. She had designed a nursery. She had given interviews about the baby. She was on the edge of the biggest chapter of her life. On the night of August 8, 1969, members of the Manson family entered the property at 10,050 Cielo Drive in Los Angeles. Sharon Tate was inside with 4 friends. By morning, all 5 were dead. She was found with 16 stab wounds. The word pig had been written on the front door in her blood. She was not chosen for anything she had done. She was chosen because of where she lived, because she was there, because Charles Manson's followers needed a location and her address was the one they had. The trial became one of the most covered in American history. Manson became a cultural phenomenon. Documentaries, magazine covers, television appearances, a man who orchestrated the murder of a pregnant woman given the treatment of a dark celebrity. Her mother, Doris Tate, spent the rest of her life advocating for victims' rights because the system that processed the killers seemed more interested in the killers than in what they had destroyed. Hollywood kept filming the day after her death. The machine didn't pause for a single hour. The next case never closed. The husband is still alive, and the official record still uses a word that has never stopped pulling at the evidence. Natalie Wood had been famous since she was 8 years old. Miracle on 34th Street in 1947, Rebel Without a Cause in 1955, West Side Story in 1961, 3 Academy Award nominations, one of the most sustained and celebrated careers in Hollywood history. In November of 1981, she was 43 years old, not fading, not finished. She was filming Brainstorm with Christopher Walken. She was very much in the middle of everything. Over the weekend of November 28th, she was aboard a yacht called the Splendor near Catalina Island with her husband Robert Wagner and Christopher Walken. On the night of November 29th, she went missing. Her body was found in the ocean the following morning. She was wearing a red jacket. The coroner initially ruled the death an accidental drowning. Case closed. The yacht's crew reported hearing arguing during the night. The captain of the Splendor later gave interviews stating that he had changed his statement at Robert Wagner's request. In 2011, the case was formally reopened. In 2012, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department officially named Robert Wagner, her husband, who was on the boat, as a person of interest. He has never been charged. He has declined to cooperate with investigators. The official cause of death was changed from accident to undetermined. The water that filled her lungs was cold. The night was dark. And more than 40 years later, no one has answered the question the evidence makes impossible to ignore. The case is still open. Robert Wagner is still alive. And the industry that built Natalie Wood into one of the most celebrated actresses who ever lived has never once applied any of its considerable institutional weight to demanding what happened on that boat. The next story didn't happen in 1981. It happened in 2009, and 2 people died in the same bedroom before anyone asked the right questions. By 2009, Brittany Murphy had been a recognizable face in American cinema for 15 years. Clueless, Girl, Interrupted, 8 Mile, Just Married, Sin City. She had range, she had audiences, she had a voice acting career that extended her reach to an entirely different demographic. She was 32 years old. She was still very much building whatever came next. On the morning of December 20th, 2009, she collapsed in the bathroom of her Hollywood Hills home. She was taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. She was declared dead at 10:04 that morning. The official cause listed pneumonia, iron deficiency anemia, and multiple drug intoxication as contributing factors. The coroner ruled it natural. Case closed. 5 months later, Simon Monjack, her husband, died in the same house, the same bedroom. The official cause, pneumonia and severe anemia. The same combination, 2 people. Same house, same cause. 5 months apart. The Los Angeles County Department of Public Health investigated the ice property for toxic mold. Elevated levels were found. Her mother gave interviews insisting that her daughter had been in excellent health, that the timeline didn't fit, that the official explanation created more questions than it resolved. A 2013 investigation by the Brittany Murphy Foundation documented what it described as significant inconsistencies in the official account. Nothing was ever reopened. No charges were ever filed. The house still stands. Simon Monjack is dead. Brittany Murphy is dead. And the industry that profited from her talent for 15 years moved on to the next project before her family had answered a single question about what that house had done to her. Number 1 on this list is the most famous actress who ever lived. She died under circumstances connected to the most powerful men in American government, and the official record still contains a word, one specific word, that has refused to stay buried for 60 years. On August 4, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her home in Los Angeles. She was 36 years old. The official cause of death was acute barbiturate poisoning, a probable suicide, the coroner said. That word, probable. It has never stopped pulling at people. Because a probable suicide, when the person who died was connected to both the President of the United States and the Attorney General of the United States, is a different kind of probable. She had sung Happy Birthday to President Kennedy 3 months earlier at Madison Square Garden. Every person in that room understood what that moment meant. What the cameras didn't follow was what came after, the documented relationship between Monroe and Robert Kennedy that was active in the final weeks of her life. FBI files released under Freedom of Information requests confirmed she was under surveillance, that her phone conversations were being monitored, that there were contacts with Kennedy in the period immediately before her death. When those files were released, they confirmed the scope of the surveillance. They did not explain what the surveillance was looking for or why. Her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, changed her account of that night multiple times across the following decades. The timeline of who found Monroe and exactly when has never been reconciled into a single consistent version. Bobby Kennedy was reported to be in Los Angeles that weekend, a fact confirmed, disputed, confirmed again, across different documents and different witness accounts over 60 years. The case was never formally reopened. The verdict still reads, probable. Hollywood produced the myth within weeks, the tragic blonde, the icon too luminous for the world to hold. It produced the image, the posters, the documentary specials, the impersonators, the cultural shorthand that makes her face one of the 5 most recognized in the history of human civilization. What it produced with considerably less enthusiasm was any sustained institutional pressure to answer the questions the evidence makes unavoidable. The most famous actress who ever lived died under circumstances connected to the most powerful family in American politics. The industry that built an empire on her image never once demanded an answer. It just kept selling the photograph. 10 women, 10 decades, 10 different explanations. A mother who chose prayer, a tabloid circus at a crash site, a killer who served 3.5 years, an industry that ignored what was being done to a 15-year-old for 20 years, a hotel room with 9 prescriptions and no convictions, an overloaded plane that took off anyway, a pregnant woman chosen for her address, an open case where the husband is a person of interest and has never been charged, a house where 2 people died of the same cause 5 months apart, and the most famous actress in the world, whose death is still officially probable. These are not 10 separate tragedies. This is one pattern repeated across 90 years of Hollywood history. The machine extracts what it needs. It photographs the talent, monetizes the image, packages the grief, and sells the story. And when the worst happens, when the camera goes dark and the questions become too loud, it finds a new face and starts again. It does not protect. It has never protected. And not one of the 10 women on this list received from the industry that profited from her existence the institutional support, the accountability, or the answers that her story demanded. The machine is still running. The names will change. The pattern will not. Were these tragedies, accidents, or a system that failed 10 women in 10 different ways? The industry never answered. Leave yours below.